Okay. Well, welcome everybody. Good to see everybody again. And let me go ahead and share the screen. I started the recording, so we're recording now. And I'm trying to share the screen. There we go. So we're talking about knowing people, okay? But before we get cranked up, anything from last week left over? Any questions or comments or thoughts or applications? Where we at?
Yeah, just one. Bringing in that internal to external reward. Just applying just to say thank you. You know, sometimes it's not an easy thing. I think at the end of your meeting, you were saying love God first so you can love people. I said when you're not putting God first, you go straight into you're in your flesh. So it's easy to give them a fleshly response. But
Right.
you know, when you're putting God first, then you know you're looking after the people in a way, just doing the internal, just a value, just saying thank you. You know, I done it this week just to see if it was easy, and you know what, it was a bit of a challenge.
Yeah.
But you know what, I just persisted with it and just kept doing it, and that's what a aha moment I got this week.
Yeah, and you nailed it spot on, because it's not natural for us to do that. The natural thing to do is to look for problems. You know, we expect everything to be smooth and flowing right. And so when something isn't right, that's what we focus on. So then we zone in and look at that, and that's what we start talking about. But we got to learn to flip it. It's exactly what you did is perfect, because we develop a habit of starting to look for things that are good, look for things to say thank you for, look for things to say good job, and starting to try to find things that we can bless people with instead of because again, the natural response is to look for the problem, is to find the things that aren't right and zone on that. And so it's a learning thing. It's a changing the habit. It's one of those renewing our minds thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Good job. Good job. And honestly, a lot of the things we talk about are things that can become habits over time, and to cram it into 13 weeks just means that we're just sort of, like a crop duster spraying the crops out of an airplane. We're just kind of spraying the crops and seeing what sticks. And so over time, more and more will stick. We'll see some fruit of it, I hope. Well, I got a lot to do today, so I want to jump into it. We're in the second week of the third unit. We're talking about in this third unit. The first unit we talked about what a leader and a manager's job is. The second, we talked about organizations and different kinds of organizations, and different ways that we approach dealing with different kinds of organizations. Now we're talking about the people part of it in the third section, about dealing with individuals. And so, but again, everything we do is with people or through people or for people. And so if it wasn't for people, we wouldn't have anything to do. I've always joked, for as far back as I can remember, life would be a piece of cake if we didn't have to deal with people. It'd be boring, it'd be lonely, it would be the pits, but it'd sure be easy, because everything we do is with people or through people. And that's where it gets complicated. So we need to learn to understand a little better. And today we're going to focus on teamwork and accountability. And these are things we could make a whole lot of time working with, but we want to just brush over them again right quick. And again, we're talking about how does an effective manager work with people. That's how, sort of our focus in this unit. How does effective manager work with people? So again, organizations are systems. And if we're thinking about systems, one idea that comes to mind is the idea of teamwork. We think of the whole package operating together, everything in harmony and clicking along together, and then say, okay, does teamwork fit into this picture as well? And it can. Sometimes it does. So to start off, what is a team? You tell me what you think a team is.
Group of people coming together to complete a goal, task.
Yeah.
in a timely manner.
That you can't put it much better than that. Yeah, it's a group of people working on a common task or common goal, and coordinating their efforts and so forth. Now, more and more over the last, heavens, 30, 40, 50 years, people talk about teamwork in organizations, whether they're and churches even have gone to creating small groups within churches. And so, and those are for a little bit different function, but why do people want teams? Why is that such a big issue for us? Why do we even talk about having teams in organizations?
What tips? Because it's more productive and efficient to work together rather than by yourself.
Get more things done,
And unity.
spread out more.
Yeah, well, you share the load, but and that's a good point. It can be more efficient, but is it always going to be more efficient?
I think you're flowing. Yes.
Yeah, well,
You got it, got it.
When there's unity, yes.
Yeah,
Yeah, blessing.
You're
It-
staying there.
Ideas on stay in your own lane. That's top one.
yeah, exactly. What problems have you guys had with teams? I heard that laugh, that aha kind of thing. Said it's always more efficient. Yeah, what kind of problems have you had?
One is staying in your own lane.
That's a good one.
That's a good one.
Top
Yeah.
one.
Different people having different visions rather than working with the common goal.
Yeah.
Also, different people having different ideas about how much work they're required to do as part of that team. Like, where if you're in a team and you've got a couple of people doing most of the work and the other ones are riding on their coattails, it's not sort of really teamwork.
Vince comes into us.
Well,
They know.
Timing as well.
Oh, yeah, that's up to with the events.
Communication, I think, too. Yeah, communication.
yeah,
I think one of the biggest issues with staying in your own lane is when they don't know where their lane is.
That's a
So
great
then
one.
where
Oh, seems
where
safe.
they don't know the actual definition and concept of their position.
Well done.
So they're what's obligated for them,
right.
whether big
Yeah.
or small position. Yeah.
Engagement.
And what you guys have actually done, and it's really a kick listening to people talk, because the answers are almost always the same kinds of answers, and they're the same kinds of things. But the cool thing is, as leading and managing teams, we can keep most of those problems from happening. We can manage our teams the way that those problems never come up. And the nice thing about that is, again, the team never realizes what a great job we've done when we've prevented those problems, because it just never comes up that they had that problem was a possibility. And so we'll hit on some things. Again, we're going to brush through it really quickly, but we'll hit on the things that will actually take care of those kinds of problems. How do you fix them? Well, we'll talk exactly about how to fix, and not only how to fix, but how to prevent them, so they're not really an issue in the first place. And sometimes it takes a little patience, and sometimes it doesn't always work perfectly, but still, there's some really neat things that we can do with teams. So there's some magic buttons for teams to work, things that really have to happen before they actually get to the efficiency that we'd like to have. Okay, so one is cohesiveness, and somebody mentioned cohesiveness a while ago, where people have to be on the same page. Communication, we talked about communications as well, and those are both really huge. Those are the two things that have to happen for a team to work, and so we really have to work hard at those. And stages of growth and the norms and rules, we'll talk about that. We build those kind of things, first off, starting off the right kind of work. Now, the reason I asked about, is it always more efficient? First off, there are problems that get in the way, but is it good to have a team for any kind of work we're doing? And sometimes people say, oh, of course. Well, stop and think about it. For a team to really work, it takes some time. We'll talk more about that, but it takes time for people to understand, and you guys nailed it, exactly what my job is, how much is expected of me, how much can I get by with or not get by with. And all those things have to be ironed out, but it takes time to get there, and it's not always going to happen. Usually we can make it happen most of the time, but still we have to deal with all these personal differences and things. So for a team to come together, it takes time and effort and very intentional kinds of management and leadership to get a team to where it actually operates well together. And so we're investing a lot into that before it ever happens. And so maybe there's kinds of work where all that investment doesn't really help us. Okay. And so the easy answer is, if it takes, if the work is very routine and very, very easy to describe, and this is this job and so forth, then maybe a team is not going to help. Maybe it's not. If there's a lot of pressure, like time pressure, or a lot of if you're really tight on time, or if it's any kind of a high pressure, intense situation, a team may not be the best thing to do. You got to kind of work that one out. And one thing I've talked about is the idea of well, I don't want to drag that onto it, but sometimes if you're talking about an assembly line kind of a work where this is my job and you can tell me exactly what steps I have to take to do that job, why make a team? Because all that's going to do is just add more layers of communication, confusion, and stuff like that. Just send the person out, let that person do that person's job, and everybody else do their own job. So in some situations, a team's just not worth the effort. Okay, because it takes time, it takes intentional leadership to make it happen. If it's very complex kind of work, if it takes a lot of coordination at different parts, if it has to do with a lot of planning, if it has to do with a lot of higher level thinking and working together to coordinate strategies and plans and those kind of things, a team really can be effective. And the way that the team can be helpful is you have, and well, you guys mentioned this too, you have different people bringing the different things to the table. And so if everybody's doing the same thing, why have a team? But if everybody has different things to put together, then a team can really be helpful. And so different skills, different backgrounds, different knowledge, different understanding, different relationships, different education, different whatever kind of things that we can pull together and coordinate those things, then that's a good situation for a team. But again, obviously that's going to take some time. The right kind of team makeup, who's involved in it and who we're pulling together and how, and the right kinds of reward systems. So we'll hit on those too. Let's talk about cohesiveness, that sense of we're all in this together. We complement one another. I connected with the team. I feel like in this particular organization or in this church, in this business, in this whatever, this team is kind of who I am. Is where and I want to stick. I like being part of it. And so right off the bat, just like Rob was saying, this internal motivation, being part of a team can provide some internal motivation too. It can provide some problems, but if we do it right, then it can draw out that sense of connectedness and those internal positive things that make people feel more engaged and get more wrapped up in what they're doing. Some ways we can build cohesiveness is by having high standards. Okay. One thing that's really been a challenge for me in when I was in education, in teaching at the university, was people always talking about trying to get more students, and they'd talk about lowering standards. I said, never, never, never lower standards. If anything, raise standards, because the universities with the highest standards never have to go recruiting. People want to be part of that, because being part of something elite or something really, a really great place, people will do almost anything to be part of a group with real high standards. They'll do some nutty stuff. We have a lot of fraternities and sororities in colleges here, and students will do some really dumb, stupid stuff just to get as part of that group. You know, and they've had to put a lot of rules in place to kind of rein some of that stuff in. So having high standards. A good example is in the United States, the Marine Corps. They've got high standards. Their goal, I mean, their advertisement is the few, the proud, the Marines. You know, we're an elite group, and you've got to be something special to be part of us. Okay, we're looking for a few good men, they say. It's not everybody's gonna be a part of us, but if you can make a cut, then you can be one of us. And so a lot of that is just it increases the identity thing. People will invest a lot of themselves, give a whole lot of their lives and effort to be part of a high standard kind of a group. Small, it takes less time if it's smaller for people to learn to work together and get along together. Successes, if you're leading and managing a team, it's always a good idea just to create some opportunities for some successes early on, because that will help pull people together and kind of increase their connectedness. You don't want to go overboard with that, because then you start lowering the standards. So you don't want to do that either. Challenges, something that's very difficult, can help do that. If people have gone through some really difficult times or some real hard challenges together, they really feel connected together. We've talked a lot about vision and culture, and so working really hard at helping develop vision and culture for a team, and the high standards, the successes and the challenges are really part of doing that as well. Some other things we can do is participative leadership, and I heard somebody mention like that, just getting people involved. An autocratic team usually is not going to do real well. And honestly, if you have a really bossy kind of a leader of a team, they'll do pretty good when the boss is around, but when the boss is gone, they're playing. They're not doing anything. But if you have a participative team where everybody's kind of engaged and everybody is part of setting the goals and identifying who does what the standards are, they'll keep that up whether the boss is around or not. Similarities or not, and that's a kind of an interesting one, because we talked about balancing different kind of things that people bring. One way to build cohesiveness is have everybody the same, because you don't have any differences to kind of work through. Because it's the differences that give us challenges and make it harder to get along with somebody and work with somebody, right? But so the similar we are, the quicker we're going to be cohesive. But in the long run, it's not going to work as well, because those similarities aren't really what we're after. We're after the different things that people can do. So similarities can make it cohesive earlier. Differences can make it cohesive later as we work through the problem, the challenges, okay? High rewards to performance. The reward system for teams and groups has to be a group reward. Whatever they do as a group has to be rewarded as a group. If you start rewarding individuals, the group falls apart. Professional basketball in the United States has had a real problem with that, because they started rewarding individual performance. And there are people who played years ago who said, I cannot be part of this professional basketball anymore, because it's all about the individual. They started shifting the rewards to higher salaries and all this kind of stuff for the individuals. And lo and behold, there wasn't any teamwork anymore. And actually, some years ago, Dallas won the professional basketball championship with a bunch of guys that weren't that good. They had one really good player and a bunch of above average players. But the team they beat for the championship was sort of a dream team. It was the best players in basketball. They put that team together specifically to win the championship, but they couldn't do it because everybody was doing their own thing. And so, because they didn't have that group mentality, because they didn't have a group performance reward. So make sure that whatever they do as a group gets rewarded, pats on the back, thank yous. If there's any bonuses or whatever kind of reward you give has to be given to the group. You can recognize individual performance, but the reward specifically has to go to the group. Otherwise, that's how you stop this thing about how much do I do. That's part of it. We'll talk about more later. But that's part of it, is by making everybody gets the same kind of reward. So if somebody's not carrying their weight, then everybody's saying, come on, jack it up. We need you. Okay. Competition, if you can set up some competition between different groups, you got to be careful with that one, because if it's too competitive, then they start cheating. And they start kind of pulling the rug out from under the other team and doing some dirty, nasty tricks. So with some healthy competition, some fun kinds of competitions, it can help do that. And sometimes just get away for a day of fun and games, you know, can help do that. Spending time together, working together. The more time you work together, will help with that. And the longer time, we'll talk about that more in a minute too. But just spending time together, getting to know one another, getting to get past the differences and to where you can understand and work together. Sometimes getting a group off by themselves for a while can help. That was the thing that sports teams did years ago, was they'd send the team off to a preseason camp just where they didn't have any family, nobody to talk to, nobody other than the team for a week or two, just to spend time together to sort of tie those bonds together. Having the same goals is important. I heard that a while ago. Because everybody has to be on the same page, otherwise they're going to go different directions. And balanced individual assets, making sure there's some complementary, that different people are bringing different things to the table. But again, that takes time. It takes time for that to happen. Cohesiveness is the first factor that's got to be in place. The second one is communication, and that's just a no-brainer. We do it. We've got to set an example. We've got to create systems and practices that help us to communicate, developing the habit, creating opportunities. Say, okay, we're going to have a meeting on Friday. And say, I don't know what we're going to do. If you're the team leader, I have no idea what we're going to do, but I got to figure out some way to communicate something to people. I got to build that into what we do. So maybe just a regular meeting might not. But you got to think ahead of time. How do I make opportunities to where I've got to communicate and they've got to communicate together? So frequently, thoroughly, communication is one of the big keys in anything we do. So another thing that's absolutely essential, and this is something else that will solve a lot of problems for teams, okay, is these idea of the 4 stages of development. It's very predictable. And I've seen, in all the years I was in class, I always had groups in the classrooms. And I began to see over time how I could predict and these groups are going to go through these stages. As the instructor, I'm going to set up opportunities for them to walk through those stages, to help them to walk through those stages. They don't know I'm doing that, but that's what I'm doing. And it made a lot of difference. And later on, we started talking about groups. They could say, now I see how this works. The first stage is forming. When you get a group of people together, it's kind of exciting to be part of something new and different, isn't it? Some new faces, some new jobs, some new activities, some new goals, whatever. It's kind of an exciting time, and people are kind of, your eyes are wide open, your ears are wide open, trying to understand what you're supposed to be doing. New relationships and all kinds of newness makes it a kind of exciting time. So forming is kind of exciting time for people. But then it kind of crashes real pretty quick, because then the newness wears off. We start getting used to one another. The things that we overlooked before that didn't really matter all of a sudden start irritating us. You know, different habits different people have just kind of start rubbing us a little bit. Now, I know you guys are all spiritual people, and nobody's ever really kind of gotten under your skin a little bit. So maybe I'm just talking to myself. But if anybody can help the others understand, all right. But if you go through this storm, I think it should be done this way. I think it should be done this way. Somebody might think that they don't have to do anything, that the rest of the team can carry them. All those kind of things start popping up, okay? And you have to let them come about. It's going to happen. And you got to take time to walk through them, okay? Now, like I said, I've always had groups in my classes, and a couple of stories. I always assigned groups. Well, at the first I didn't. I just let people come together and form their own groups, pick them. And I realized after a while that was a problem, because people that knew one another had something in common, especially if they were part of the same fraternity or sorority, some social group, maybe they were in athletics or a band. They had something in common, they would naturally form together, which makes sense. You know, I know you, let's work together. And so they would kind of pull together, that when they got in the group working together, they would support, help one another, but they would ignore the other people. And so after a while, you actually had 2 groups, you know. And I had one that was so bad, over the course of the class, it had gotten so bad that they didn't even talk anymore. And toward the end of the term, a couple of guys came to me and said, we can't communicate with them. They don't answer our texts, our emails. We just never have. We try to submit stuff. They said we've already done it, stuff like that, and we don't know what to do. I said, well, we're not making any changes right now, but partly because it's a learning thing for them too. But let's just keep on going and kind of see how things develop. Well, I've always had a group project in the classes. At the end of the term, they turned in a group project, and when it was the day to turn them in, these guys came up and said, "Here's our project. We have no idea what the other guys did, but here's what we've done." About 5 minutes later, the other part of the group came up and said, "Here's our project." I said, "I've already got one for your group. Too late." But we don't know what they did. It's a group project. And so if your group's not working, if you guys have pulled away, that's something you should have dealt with because you knew it was a group project. I'm only going to take one project for now. Part of the reason I knew that what the guys had already turned in was going to be better what these other people had done. So it was a better thing for them to do it anyway. And sure enough, it was theirs was a lot better and it worked out well. But what I realized was by allowing them I had set up a problem by creating a situation where they could have two different groups form within that one group. So after that, I always I would assign the groups and I would divide them according to different things, men and women, different kinds of stuff. And so I would just divide them up to where they were kind of mixed up a little bit. And that problem went away. That was the end of that. A few years later, I had a group in class, and this is a short class. This is only a month long. It was during the summer, and so I went through the dividing them all up into different groups for the class. And I looked at one of the group and I thought, oh man, this is a problem. It's a short class, and so this group development stuff really gets compressed. They were spending a lot of time together, so they still do it, but it was. This is going to be a serious problem. There was one guy who was a fraternity president, really preppy guy, with very neat, tidy, upper middle class kind of guy. Another guy had a ponytail down to his waist, so they were pretty different already. There was a guy from Queens, New York, who was a very inner city kind of place, and Andrew Willen can tell you all about Queens. That's kind of her. But he's a black guy who came from the projects, had a pretty rough life growing up. But he was a football player. They were on scholarship, and he had a reputation for having a bit of a chip on his shoulder about racial problems and things like that. But he was there, big burly guy. He was a lineman. He was about 6'5" and 350 pounds or something, like big guy. Another guy had just arrived the week before from Japan, could barely speak English. Another girl, Virgin Islands, totally different kind of a culture down there. And then there was another girl in the group as well. So you had 5 different people from 3 different cultures, and within the United States, there were still 3 different subcultures. So the only thing these guys had in common that they had heads, arms, and legs, and that was about it. So I told them, "Hey guys, this may be a problem. Getting together and communicating together is going to be a problem. It's going to be a challenge for you. And probably, I'm going to tell you right now, the work you do at the beginning is probably not going to be very good. Over time, it'll probably be fine, but in the beginning, it's not going to work very well. If you want to, this is the only time I ever did it. If you want to, I'll reform the groups and divide you guys up." And the guy from New York says, "Nah, we'll be all right." You guys okay with that? And they were. Sure enough, for the first week and a half or so, their work was really bad. It was terrible. And they were getting low grades, and they were all getting kind of frustrated. The girl from the Virgin Islands came to me and said, okay, she told me that she was on a scholarship from a group in the Virgin Islands. If she did not carry straight A's in her classes, she'd lose her scholarship. I thought, man, that is a high bar. I mean, to carry straight A's is not easy. She had to, if she didn't get an A in the class, she would lose her scholarship and have to go home. I said, I'll take care of it. I'm not going to let a problem in the one class ruin your college education. Don't worry about it, but just let's take a little more time, because I knew that they were going through these stages. Okay. And so, and they were in the storming stage. They didn't get along. They didn't communicate very well together. So just be patient with me and we'll work it out. Within less than a week, there was a really solid turn. It's kind of like somebody crawling out of the swimming pool. You just step by step, they were emerging out of the water. These guys were step by step, just kind of crawling up out of the muck and onto the side. They were really starting to do some. By the end, it was some of the best work I'd ever had in that class. And in that class, I let them pick a project, the topic for the project, and so they got up to do their present their project to the class. And this big black guy with his booming voice says, "We decided to do our project on diversity. We think we know something about that." And everybody busted out laughing because, again, these guys were just as different as they could be. But the point was they'd gone past that storming stage and learned to work together really, really well. As different as they were, learning to communicate together when words didn't even mean the same thing. English words from the girl from the Virgin Islands, the guy from Japan, and the guy from New York didn't mean the same thing. If you start talking about mom and dad and cars and trucks, their whole mental picture of those things was different. They had to get past all that stuff, plus different expectations, different abilities and stuff. They worked through that forming stage into the norming stage. It's really nice to give us rhyming words for these to help us out, right? Norming is when you start establishing who we are, what our expectations are, the way we work, the standards we have, and all those kinds of things. Okay. And what our roles are, and then performing. But we get through those, and then you can start clicking. It takes time to work through those. Okay. And it's got to be very intentional. We've got to give people the opportunities to go step by step. Now, in churches, I've seen a lot of times when people would try to form groups in the churches, and they'd get frustrated because the first week or two, everything's great. They're in the forming stage. And then things start shaking up a little bit. They're not forming. And I was working with one pastor sometime 7 years ago. He'd start groups, and then he'd say, "Now it's not working. We need to break them up and try again." I told him, "You give them time. Just give them some time to work through these things. Now it's not working. We got to break them up and start. We've got to try something different." Well, the bottom line was you just had to let them go through these things of spending time together, getting to know one another, getting to work together, and all those kinds of things before they could actually come together as the cohesive group. So make sure you're allowing those things to happen, forming, storming, and those things we talked about earlier for building cohesiveness can really help to do that. Okay, we all good?
Yeah.
Good.
We're all in the norm.
Okay. I'm glad you guys just started off right off the bat just performing. You hadn't go through all that forming and stuff.
Not here.
Guys,
We stay in our lane.
I am so well. Stay in your lanes. That's where we're going. Just a minute, right now. Okay.
Oops.
Yeah. Thanks for reading the next slides for me. Another big thing we got to pay attention to is the norms and the rules. The norms, the standards, the expectations, the shared beliefs, which means things that we agree on about who we are and how we act. You know, which that's how we get. The norms will say, and we'll talk about how to get rid of those too, that I can slack, I can get by, other people will carry me. Well, if we have norms that say that doesn't happen, if we have group rewards and things like that, and if the group comes together and sets these norms in places, no, we don't do that, then you start developing a situation where those things just don't come up. If we set the right kind of work and the right kind of reward systems and put them together in a way that makes sense and balance those individual capabilities and things, then those differences don't really pop up so much. We'll get by a lot of that stuff. But the norms and the shared beliefs, the patterns that people follow, this is how I act when I'm in this group. Just like with the culture of the organization, the norms are kind of the culture of the personality of the group. when I was the department chair in my department for a few years, I always, I think I shared this a while back, I consistently talked about how that department was known for being very collegial. Everybody got along and worked together. Even though everybody was doing different stuff, they still were very, very cooperative and collegial, helped one another out, and they were all very hardworking. And during that time, they were known within the school for being collegial and working hard. And we're really at the top of everything that the school did at that time. Later on, people didn't really reinforce that, and those norms begin to kind of fall apart. So you got to keep working on those things. Norms of high performance. You know, we do chicken right is a group norm. We're kind of doing, we have those high standards and things like that. Some common useful norms and things that kind of help. And you got to kind of pick and choose what works for you. Okay, but these are just some suggestions. Being productive, having high standards, doing things right, doing it right the first time. And if you don't do it right the first time, make sure it's right before you finish. Open-handedness, being shared and helpful to other people, not kind of pulling things to yourself. It kind of, I've got this. I worked for some places where a lot of people had vehicles assigned to them, and you never would get, if you ever got in somebody else's vehicle, you're in some deep doo-doo. You're in trouble. Don't you ever get in anybody else's vehicles. Isn't that? Versus the other hand, say, yeah, if you need it, take it. You know, we'll work it together somehow. Just let's make sure it all works together. So sharing the credit's always helpful. Being collegial and supportive of one another, being compassionate. Just some suggestions for some norms or some common group rules that might help. I've had groups in the classes, and I'd say, what kind of norms do you guys have? And the higher performing ones were, we all work together on the projects. If we got a project to do, we'll come together, and we might figure out what to do, but we'll lay out a plan to where everybody knows exactly what to do, and then we'll divide it up. Now, one thing I did with them is they all did peer evaluations. They all rated one another, not themselves, but rated one another on their contributions to the group. And that's how the group points were divided up, was by those evaluations. So if somebody was slacking off, if somebody wasn't really carrying their weight, they got a lower evaluation and they got less credit. And so somebody said, no, somebody's not doing their work. I said, well, here's how this works. If they're not doing their work, they don't get a high evaluation, and you end up getting their points at the end. So, okay, that's cool. And then we'll talk about accountability here in a minute too. But sharing credit, collegiality, compassion, they would make sure they shared the load, they communicated well. Someone told me they developed a habit of if anybody sent a text or an email, they answered it as soon as possible. If they set up a meeting, everybody would respond, yes, we will be there, unless there was a serious problem to explain themselves. So they set up those kinds of expectations that these are the things that can help us work together. And so they would come up with those on their own. I never had to do that. Roles, those are the norms. Those are group kinds of things. Roles is the individual thing. And this is what Rob was talking about a while ago about staying in your lane. Okay. Roles is about my place. Where do I fit? You know, everybody's got different things they bring to the table. What do I bring to the table? It may be that I do the same thing in every different situation, or it may shift from place to place. There may be one time when I do one thing and one time when I do something else. You know, that those things emerge over time. But nevertheless, over time I understand where I fit, what thing I do, how I fit into this group, what kind of contributions that I make, given my background, my history, my abilities, or maybe nobody else can do. Maybe nobody else wants to. You know, maybe I'm the custodian that cleans the floors or cleans the bathroom, whatever. But that's my role. That's where I fit. Now, we find that a lot of groups will develop specific roles, not always, but many times they'll develop roles where people fit into different slots to help the group to work. Now, the task specialist, maybe I call it the group leader. who knows and understands what the job is, how to get it done, and kind of helps coordinate everything for everybody else. Sometimes it's the same person in every situation. Sometimes it may shift. In one kind of job, this person might take the lead, and another kind of job, somebody else might take the lead. So however that works out, if it works for that group is fine. But it needs to be there at some point. Somebody needs to be coordinating things and kind of helping people move ahead. The team maintenance special, somebody came up with big words for these for some reason. The team maintenance special is kind of the social atmosphere. If people start getting a little crossways with one another, a couple of people start fussing or kind of bowing up against one another, the team maintenance person, the social atmosphere person is going to be in there kind of smoothing things over, you know, kind of helping things settle down a little bit, kind of taking the edge off and helping people to kind of get along. Can't we all just get along? Kind of stuff, but just kind of helping to move past those points where people are kind of butting heads a little. The facilitator is kind of like a second in command or a lieutenant. That the leader is kind of setting the pace for the group, but sometimes you need somebody to kind of help pull things together in the back. You know, if you watch a lot of old movies, there's always a sidekick. You know, somebody else. Everybody says, "Oh," and if you're not sure what to do, you go to this person and say, "Now, what am I supposed to be doing?" You know, the leader's busy. I don't want to bother him or her right now, but you know, any suggestions on how to do this, or will, you know, I didn't get what we're doing right here, or something like that. So, sort of that lieutenant kind of person. Sometimes there'll be somebody who kind of takes the lead in helping to establish the culture and the norms of the group. Keeps reinforcing this is who we are, this is how we do, and things like that. When I heard people in my work group in that construction business saying, well, you know, we do chicken right, and that was somebody doing this kind of stuff and kind of helping carry that culture, those norms down the road. The gatekeeper is kind of the one who's getting tapped into the outside, who knows what's going on, and you know, if there's any kind of changes, if you've got some things to do with, you know, if you're setting up some tents, coordinating with somebody in another city, and you've got different kinds of government people you're working with and different churches, you know, the leader might be coordinating things right here, but then maybe the gatekeeper be something to learn something about. Oh, there's this city ordinance here we've got to pay attention to, or you know, Pastor so and so says no, we can't do it this way. We've got to make these changes because of this, stuff like that. So, sort of an information manager. So those aren't always going to happen, but over time, these are some kind of things that happen that you can see happening sometimes. So for high performance teams, clear purposes. I heard goals earlier. So having those clear purposes and goals, and they need to be group goals. Individual goals will shatter a team faster than anything. Clear norms and roles. We need to know what's expected of us as a group and what's expected of me as a person. These take time. They take time. And they take opportunities for us to work together, to slug through some problems sometimes, to kind of iron these things out. Balance our individual assets, different kinds of people, different kind of capabilities, bringing different things to the table, team-based rewards, and individual accountability. Now let's talk about accountability for a minute. This is one of my favorite topics, because I've done a lot of stuff on accountability over the years. So it's a big word, but what is accountability? Tell me what you think accountability is.
It's being held to a standard and you're keeping yourself to a standard.
Okay. Yeah. Tell me a little bit more. How does that happen?
So like, you know, with the group norms, that's what keeps you accountable, that's what holds you to a standard. And it's a standard that's held by the group, you know, and so that helps you keep accountable because everyone keeps you accountable by the standards, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah,
The group keeps you accountable, holds you to standard.
yeah. And that's a good, there's one more thing that really makes accountability up. Accountability is one of those powerful motivators in our lives. One of those powerful things that affects what we do and how we do it. And so I'm going to try to explain that a little bit. One thing that tends to happen a lot is when you say accountability, people think responsibility. When they mean accountability, they say responsibility, but they're different. It helps to understand how they're different, because responsibility is part of it, but there's more to it. Okay. Responsibility is an obligation. Okay. If I'm responsible for going to the store and buying milk and eggs, okay, I'm responsible for that. That's an obligation. That's a job I have to do. Okay. And once I've done that, I can check that off the list. I'm not responsible for that anymore. I'm done with it. Okay. Some are ongoing responsibilities. Some are just kind of one up. But anyway, it's an obligation that I have. It's like a debt that I've got to pay. I've got to do something to erase that off of my list of things that I have to do. Okay. So that's what responsibility is. Accountability is having to answer for that. Okay. So I can have those expectations in place. I've got to go to the store. I got to buy the right kind of milk and the right kind of eggs. And I've got to go to the store that has the best milk and eggs. And I've got to be back in such and such a time, and so forth. Okay. So I've got, there may be some expectations about how I do that, but only answering for it is when I become accountable. Right. And we got a scripture for that. What's a scripture on accountability? Hebrews 13:17. Obey those who have the rule over you. Okay, so there's somebody who's got some authority, and be submissive, for they watch out for your souls. So their responsibility is our soul, right? But the next line is the accountability part, for they watch out for your souls as those who must give account. So just watching out for the souls, I can tell you to do things all day long, but if you're not going to account for that, why are you going to bother? It might make you feel better yourself to do what you're supposed to do. But if I'm not going to make you account for that, there's been a big push in the United States to back off on police and decriminalize a lot of things and not make people answer for crimes. And so guess what happens? Crime goes crazy. In Washington, in the state of Washington, they decriminalized a lot of drug use and lower level drug activity. They've got more drug addicts. It's driving crazy. And now they're trying to change the laws because they can't manage the state with all the drug crimes and drugs that are going on. And they've got people that the drug use and all the social problems from increased drug use is really causing some serious problems. People are moving out like crazy because of it. So accountability is the important part. It works because if I'm accountable, if somebody's going to ask me to answer for what I've done, that's me personally. That's who I am and what I am. That's a character thing for me and how I'm going to give an answer for that. Okay. So it's how I respond when somebody asks me to account is very near and dear to my heart. It tells me, it tells you, it tells everybody who I am and what kind of person, what my character level is. And so we talked about motivation. One of the things of motivation is our identity. Accountability is one of a powerful motivation thing. Now, the part of the trick is that we anticipate being accountable. We learn this when we're little tiny things. 2-year-old kid walks over and slaps another little kid. Hauls off and gives him a haymaker. And mom or dad says, "Why did you do that?" So if you're 2 years old and somebody asks you why you hit a kid, do you have any idea why you hit him? You're 2 years old. You just did it. It seemed like the thing to do at the time. I don't know why I did that. But we begin to learn when we're really small that life calls us to answer for what we do. So we learn early on that we're going to answer. So we begin to think, I've got this responsibility. This thing might happen. How am I going to answer? If you're driving down the highway and all of a sudden you see a police car behind you with the lights on, I guess they do that down there too. The first thing you do is, well, what am I doing? How am I going to answer when the policeman asks me why I did whatever it is I think I did? You know, we start, it drives a lot of our thinking, a lot of our decisions is, how am I going to respond to somebody if they ask me about this?
Yeah.
Honestly, it drives a lot of our life. Does it always work? It always drives our decisions, but it can be toxic if we don't do it right. There always, whenever somebody does something wrong, you'll hear somebody pipe up, hold them accountable, make them accountable for that, which means punish somebody for doing something that you didn't like. But what they don't understand is that accountability can be toxic, because sometimes we can take shortcuts. Okay. If I've got to hire somebody and I've got two candidates that look really good, one's 25 and one's 55, on paper, they're pretty much the same except for the age. Who do you think I'm going to hire?
25-year-old.
Why am I going to hire the young person?
Because you'll be there longer.
But see, what we've just done is we created a situation where I might make a bad choice just because it's easy for me to answer. If my boss asks me, why did you hire so-and-so? Well, you know, younger people can stick with us longer. You can't teach an old dog new tricks. Younger people are easier to teach and learn things. So we've got all kinds of answers already for how we're going to respond to that. What that means is I didn't do a good job of really digging past the layers to see which one really is the better candidate for us. Okay. And so I can make a lot of really bad decisions by these shortcut answers. Okay. Sometimes I can cover up answers. I know I can be accountable for something else like that. And I can expect that, and I can make a bad decision just so I give an easy answer. Or I can, if I don't know it's coming and somebody blindsides me and say, why did this happen? Well, I can start lying about it. So we've got to be paying attention to when we set up accountability. That's why group accountability is important. So everybody in the group has to answer together. And it may be that you have a different kind of, the group rates one another or something like that. But we've got to have some accountability that understands people might take shortcuts and think those things through ahead of time. But it's those expectations. Who's asking? You know, who's going to ask me about this? Is it police? Is it my pastor? Is it my parents, my spouse, whoever? And if I've got two different bosses or two people at work that's going to ask me, I'm going to answer one person one way because that's what they want to hear. I'm going to answer another person a different way because that's what one person might want to know if I'm on time that day or if I'm planning ahead. Another person might want to know how well I'm doing in communication, and somebody else might want a neat workplace or whatever. Different bosses and different people expect different kind of things. So I'm going to put my patterns together. I'm going to do my life and do my job in a way to where if so-and-so asks me about it, I can tell them what they want to hear. Okay. So who's asking and what do they want are things that drive the vast majority, and people don't often want to believe this, the vast majority of what we do on a day-to-day basis comes out of who we think we're going to have to answer to and what they're going to want to hear from us. We started learning that from our parents and on through the years. Now we understand that when we also will try to skip out on them. And if you start thinking about it, and I've heard Dr. Wayne talk about this a good bit, but because who's going to stand before God in judgment?
Yeah.
The church or the non-believers?
The church.
Church.
That's right. But what does the traditional church over the years say about that? They think that the non-believers are going to be judged and we're okay, right? I'm saved, I get in, right? No problems here. All I got to do is say, I'm under the blood, I'm saved, you know, and just have a free pass. Why? Because that's a whole lot easier story to buy than I'm gonna have to stand before Jesus and answer for, as the scripture says, for every idle word that I've spoken. Okay. When we begin to understand that I've got to answer to Jesus for every idle word that I've spoken, one thing, it just kind of scares the socks off you, you know. But it really helps us to understand this is the expectations that I've got to align with. And so, as we said a while ago, I know what the rules are. Accountability helps me to stick within my lane and to do what I need to be doing. That making sense?
Yeah.
Any questions about that? I spent just 10 minutes talking about something that's probably one of the biggest things, but the bottom line, the rules are pretty straightforward on accountability. Accountability is a big part of what we communicate. This is the expectations we have. These are our goals. This is what we expect to see at the end. And this is how we're going to know when we've got there. And so then you've got something to use in accountability. How are we doing on that? Are we on time? Do we have any problems that we need to be talking through? Are there any hiccups? Is anybody taking any shortcuts that we need to start paying attention to? Is there any kinds of other kind of things? So having the goals and having the norms and the roles, all those things help give us things to be accountable for. And as long as if we ignore it, then people start doing whatever they want to do.
Yeah.
So, okay, same in things here. Some takeaways. Write down anything that matters that kind of strikes you. Application. Pick something. Make it simple and specific. Maybe write out some goals or norms for any team that you lead or a part of. One way you might make that goal or that norm come about. Or maybe something like that, some things that you're responsible for, some things you're accountable for. Because sometimes just being aware of those things can make a big difference. Next week, we'll talk about personality and diversity. We kind of touched a little bit on that today. But personality and diversity, there's some stuff that I think will be surprising for you. It's a lot of fun. Diversity is a pretty interesting animal. And so is personality. So we'll talk about some of that stuff too. Okay? Questions, comments, thoughts, ideas, frustrations?
That's good. It's powerful. Yeah. Yeah, it sheds some light on, gives a kind of a fresh perspective on it as well, which is good, on accountability and what it actually means.
Yeah, not getting caught up with responsibility and accountability.
Yeah.
People get mixed around.
Yeah, and they normally do. I promise you, if you pick up any article in the news or anything they wrote and they start talking, they'll mix them up. They'll mix them up. 8 times out of 10, they got them backwards.
You should have done that.
Yeah, stop thinking. It doesn't make any sense if you get them backwards because then you don't know what to do.
I've got a question.
Yeah.
It was about the role in the teams. You know how you were saying there's the gatekeeper and then there's the leader and then there was the person like the lavender oil.
Uh-huh.
Say, I always thought if there was much more lavender oil in a team, that there'd be less conflict, but that's actually not true, is it? Because you need someone who's a gatekeeper, you need someone who's the historian, you need someone who's the leader. Like we can't all be Robs like the lavender oil. Do you know what I mean?
You need your five herbs and spices.
I thought it was like a facilitator.
You do as I say, fella.
That is really a good comment, and I love that because you're exactly right. the more things that we have going on that are different, the more situation we have for conflict, you know? But
Yeah.
it takes all, just like if you're driving a car, you got to have the wheels, you got to have the engine, you got to have all the different parts. If you don't have all the parts, you can't drive the car. And cars get more complicated all the time, trying to make them work better. And so if you don't have those if you have all those kind of things, yeah, there's more place for conflict, but that also means that you've got more opportunities for it to be useful, for it to do some good stuff. And so, yeah, it's more difficult. And that's why sometimes teams are just not a good idea, because it's not worth the conflict. It's not worth the hassle of managing it. You know, it just doesn't really help you any. If it doesn't help, don't do it. If it helps, jump in with both. But it takes some time and some effort to manage it. And I've seen it over and over again. These principles, if you put them in place, they really make a difference. And it takes time, takes habits, but you got to give them time to work through all those conflicts, all those kinds of differences. Setting up group rewards, setting up a group evaluation, a peer evaluation where everybody's kind of rating one another. Some of those kinds of things, and there are other kind of things you can do too. But those will really help get rid of a lot of the problems that people usually have with groups.
That's good.
They will, and it's kind of funny. Again, people think, "Wow, this is a really cool group. I don't know what was wrong with that other group I had." And I would talk to students over and over again. So what's different about these groups? And at the end of the semester, or even after a year or so after they were in my class, well, this one worked, and they may or may not know why, but it worked because of this. Or the group you were in this other class or this other situation didn't work because they didn't follow the rules. You know, they didn't do it the right way. And so it's complex because you just got a whole lot of different people with a lot of different stuff. But it could really make a difference. You know, how different are Peter, James, and John?
Yeah, true.
And then you add all the rest of the apostles and all the other disciples on top of that. What a strange group of guys, you know. But Jesus knew exactly what he was doing. You know, these are the ones that we're going to build the future of the world on.
Yeah.
These are ones I'm going to establish my covenant with and spread to the rest of the world. And but I mean, just like night and day. John was kind of a dreamer, kind of a head in the clouds kind of guy. You know, Peter was a bold, you know, let's jump right in the middle of this thing. Let's do it. You know? Act first and think later, you know. And James was sort of the administrator guy. He was always kind of rationally thinking through things. So just as different as they can be. And I imagine they had their fair share of challenge, even when they were fishing before they really got together with Jesus. I'm sure they rubbed each other the wrong way a bunch, you know. So. Peter, we're getting close to shore. Put your clothes on, dude. You know, go ahead. I'm kidding right now. I got fish to drag in. Give me a break. All in all, it makes life fun.
It does.
Father, thank you for this time together. Thank you for what you're doing with us and amongst us. Thank you for what you're doing for us, because what you're doing for us is more than we can ask or think. I love you, Lord Jesus. I love you and I appreciate you and I'm grateful, and I pray your care, your blessing, your attendance on each one, and for the entire Ignite teams, Father, for their all the resources and all the supplies, the relationships. I bless them with health. I bless them to prosper the work of their hands. I bless the meditation of their hearts and the thoughts in their minds. In Jesus' name, I surround them with grace and mercy. Amen. I love you guys. Catch you later.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
I really appreciate it.